Blog Talk Radio.
Alternative facts.
The following message is transmitted at the request of the United States government. At 12:07 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, numerous unidentified objects of unknown intent and unknown origin were detected at high altitudes over multiple locations of Earth's outer space by the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, and these objects are presumed to be some form of controlled aircraft. It is not known if more of these aircraft will arrive, or if they will attempt entering Earth's atmosphere. United States citizens are encouraged to monitor local media outlets, as more updates will follow as information becomes available. The following message is transmitted at the request of the United States government. Attacks by the undead have been reported in several states across the country. The dead are rising from their graves and are attacking the human race. At this time, it is expected that more attacks of this nature will occur in several other states in the next few hours. The intent behind their attack is unknown at this time. He has been observed that a bite or exchange of fluids is a method of transmission. This is an extremely dangerous situation if they crave the taste of human flesh. It is not known whether this event will last for hours, days, or even longer. Stay calm, as authorities have been dispatched to deal with these creatures. An all-clear siren will be sounded when this situation is under control. Pacific Standard Time, nor is detected a long-range nuclear missile launcher. This missile is believed to be headed in the direction of all residents within a 400-mile radius of this area should seek a fallout shelter immediately.
Welcome to Within the Chaos with your host, Rodney, the Viking Shortridge. Want to give a big old shout out to the Facebook paranormal groups that allow us to post our shows on their pages and helping us to get the word out about all of our guests. If anyone would like to speak to Black Diamond Paranormal Society, BDPS, to discuss your paranormal questions or issues, go to our website at blackdiamondps.org or email blackdiamondps@yahoo.com. As always, our services are free.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. You can listen in by calling 516-387-1922, or you can go to the Vibe Radio Network website at blogtalkradio.com/Vibe Radio Network. For deep within the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for listening to Within the Chaos. My name is Rodney Shortridge, and I'll be your host tonight. First off, I'd like to give a shout out to my cousins up in Ohio, Jennifer and Joe Shortridge of 222 Paranormal. If you get a chance, check out their talk show. You can find them on Facebook under 222 Paranormal.
Well, I hope everybody's doing good this evening.
I know the coronavirus is kicking everybody's ass and not looking good. I know some states are starting to open back up. I don't know if that's a good idea, but that's my opinion. I know here in the good state of Virginia, our governor is going to keep us locked up for a little bit longer, which I agree with. Not trying to be political or anything, but people, we got to be safe. Social distancing, washing your hands, keep your hands off your face. I know it's tough. I've been doing it, and a lot of my family and friends are doing it. So I just want everybody to be careful. There's just been too many people die from this, and that number is going to keep going up, and I want to see everybody stay safe. But beyond that, let's have a good show tonight and have a good time like we always do. So tonight our special guest is author, paranormal, and cryptic investigator Ronald Murphy. And so let me go ahead and click him over. And it's my honor to welcome you, Ronald. And, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's a great honor. So,
oh, Rodney, actually the honor is all mine. I'm very flattered to be asked onto the show. And I've been looking at this for quite some time. So, yeah, I'm excited about getting this going.
Oh, I am too. I know I had a couple of mishaps because of either I was sick or family, death or something. It was just, I've had a few guests that I've had trouble getting them on because either something's going on with them or something going on with me. But hey, the stars aligned, the moon aligned. We're ready to rock and roll.
We are. It's going to be an awesome show. Trust me, it's going to be a great one.
Okay. Well, first off, give everybody, if you don't mind, a little information about yourself and what started you on the path, to research and investigate the paranormal and cryptids.
You know what? It started whenever I was very young. I mean, I'm probably 5 years old, I guess. And my mother, before, of course, there was Blog Talk Radio or any of these podcasts, we would rely on, local radio stations. And I live very close to Pittsburgh. I still live very close to Pittsburgh, about 35 miles outside of the city. And every Saturday night, they would have a program on at about 9 o'clock on KDKA, and they would have a paranormal investigator on there talking about things that were happening. Now, I was a child of the 1970s, so this is about 1975, 1977 when all this stuff was going on. And, I'm sure the same way was going on in your neck of the woods as well, too, because we're all part of that Appalachia area. But there was a lot of UFO sightings at that time. There was a lot of Bigfoot sightings. There was a lot of strange things going on. And one of the researchers that they would have on there is Stan Gordon. And he was one of those people that would talk about, the kind of things that he was investigating, these great Bigfoot sightings alongside UFO sightings. And it really piqued my interest as a child. Now, my mother, she would take this to heart, and she would pinpoint where these sightings occurred, and then she would load up my brother and I. My brother is 2 years younger than I am, and she would load us up in the vehicle, and we would go in the back roads of western Pennsylvania looking for this creature. So that's really how I spent my childhood summers. We would be out in the car, an old car with no spare tires, that kind of a thing, looking for the creature. And I was raised to have a very open mind, to not be a skeptical person, and that really kind of stayed with me. I went to college, and I studied literature, and I studied religious studies, and in graduate school I got a master's in history, but I still had this almost unquenchable thirst for the unexplained and the unknown. And what happened, Rodney, is as I was doing my studies in literature or in history, I would find out that throughout time, things like flying saucers and things like Bigfoot or werewolves or vampires were reported. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the earliest known written account of anything, really. I mean, we're going back about 7,000 years on this. Describes a character by the name of Enkidu, which sounds surprisingly like what we would call a Bigfoot. It was, a wild man creature. It was bipedal. It was hair covered, and it was more animal than it was man. And really, from an academic point of view, the world of the paranormal, the world of cryptids, really took shape for me. It showed that all languages throughout the world have some word for these creatures that we encounter today. And that's what really keeps me going. This idea of a collective unconscious, this kind of Jungian psychology that we as a human race have these kind of creatures embroidered into our DNA. And I've been so interested for the past, 30 years, I've been doing almost nothing but researching these types of archetypes.
Okay. So which do you fall more towards? The paranormal, far as the spirits and so forth, or more cryptids? Or do you think they're both tied in together, as I do?
Well, see, I think that you've hit the nail on the head. I think it's this gray area, and there really should not be any compartmentalizing of these things. I have investigated cases where Bigfoot is seen in a place that is also pronounced with hauntings and also UFO activity. So it seems very strange that you can have this overlying paranormal phenomenon happening in one particular location. So I don't look at it as this or they or, I don't try to separate it. I try to look at it from a very a very high objective point of view. I like to look at the entire picture. So I've written on cryptids, but I've also written on ghosts, and I'm currently writing right now on extraterrestrial influence on very early Native American Indian cultures with a good friend of mine, Brian Bowden. So there's a lot of things I'd write about, but I've written about ghosts and vampires and werewolves and even mermaids. And I really think that we're talking about something that comes from maybe a possibly even unknowable force. But I do think that there's an overlapping and an interconnection with everything that we talk about.
Oh, I agree. I've been researching the paranormal for like 12 years, and experiences I had, as a child and so forth, and experiences that we've had during the investigation. It has to overlap somehow. I can't put the pieces together, but
right.
It does amaze me. But with your paranormal,
well, I was going to say that. Yeah, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think that's a good point that we have to make here. As a researcher, we owe it to ourselves to be open-minded. And I know that there's a lot of researchers out there that if they encounter what they would believe would be a Bigfoot, and they would say that this is a flesh and blood animal, and it displays some sort of paranormal type of behavior, they're very apt to throw that out because it doesn't fit their agenda. The same thing with UFO researchers. As researchers, we really do owe it to ourselves to be open-minded and to collect all the data that's out there and then compile it and then make a decision or make some sort of hypothesis over the gathered data rather than going in this with some sort of preconceived notion what we're dealing with. That's a very dangerous thing, and it's also very unscientific. At the end of the day, we're always going to be, we're going to be marginalized. We are a genre type of subject. We're on the very fringes of science. But the way I like to investigate and the way that I like to conduct my research is I like to be as in line with science, mainstream science, as much as possible, because if I'm going to be scrutinized by these people, I want to have all of my, proverbial ducks in a row, because I think that we do owe it to science. If they're not going to take this stuff literally, or if they're not going to take this stuff seriously, then we need to take this stuff seriously. And if we are able to compile enough evidence, they may look at it with an open mind as well.
Well, speaking of investigations, how do you perform, your investigations, and what type of equipment do you use?
Well, see, these are all very good subjects. My first investigation was in 1999, so we're going back, 21 years, and I went out with the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society. It's now defunct. There's some talk about getting that, resurrected again, but I went out with Eric Altman, who was a fantastic researcher, and we actually went out with a group of people, and at that point, there really was not a lot of equipment on the market. I mean, even the idea of a game cam was something that was rather, expensive and novel at the time. So it was basically boots on the ground and using just our sense of the world around us. There wasn't really much. Now, I've been on what we call high tech investigations with FLIRs and with night vision scopes and all this other kind of stuff, and I'm not so overcome by the allure of technology in that respect. I think that, or at least to me, I have had much more significant interactions with what we would call the supernatural, the paranormal, without having any kind of equipment on me whatsoever. And that's not to say that I have not recorded things. I took out an old high 8 camcorder at one time, the ones that, you take the cassettes, and I recorded some sort of anomaly, some sort of light anomaly that seemed to, open up, for lack of a better word, a portal or whatever, and it seemed to allow something through. I have the light on camera. I have, all the chaos that kind of ensued after that. But at the end of the day, it's very subjective. I might perceive a haunting far differently than you perceive a haunting, the same way with a Bigfoot encounter. I've spoken with people that have witnessed Bigfoot, and they have tears in their eyes. It affected them systemically, emotionally, physically, even spiritually at times. So I really think that you have to take each encounter as a personal encounter. It's a personal experience. That's the way that I look at research. I keep an open mind. I don't take a lot of technology, but I will go out with people that has technology. But that's the way I do it.
Okay. Well, I noticed that you've written and investigated the Wildman. What's the difference between the Wildman and the Bigfoot?
Well, actually, nothing. It's nothing more than a name. Before we had the term Bigfoot, or before we had the borrowed Native American word of Sasquatch, these things were called wild men. So if you would go back in the newspaper accounts, I know in Pennsylvania we have them going back to about 1880. We have what they would call a wild man. Same way with places in Kentucky. There's a great story of Daniel Boone actually encountering, a wild man, or they would call it a Yahoo. I mean, every place would have derivation for what we're talking about. But at the end of the day, the idea of the wild man, something that would be recognizable in Europe and Asia and Africa and Australia and even in the New World in North and South America, that is just a term for these inexplicable experiences with a bipedal creature that has some sort of intelligence to it. And it's very interesting because whenever we look through the written accounts throughout history, they all have the same basic components. Each one is identifiable. So if you would go back in time and you were investigating, like say an Almasty in Russia, you would have some sort of starting point to go on because all of these creatures act in similar manners within the environment. And from a biological perspective, that makes a lot of scientific sense that we're dealing with something that is not cataloged by science, but because they act in certain ways, they seem to be a natural part of the world around us. Now, that doesn't make that every sighting that you get of a wild man or a Bigfoot falls into those categories, because there are a lot of paranormal ones as well, too, that we simply cannot explain. But for the most part, you're dealing with what seems to be a creature that is simply outside the known boundaries of science.
Well, have you had any personal experiences with a Bigfoot?
Well, I'll tell you, I've had enough anecdotal experiences to keep me going. I've heard what could be classified as a wood knock one time. It sounded like a major league player hitting a home run. I mean, it was that kind of sound in a very, very desolate area with no chance of any human interference whatsoever. So that was pretty hard to explain. Also, it being at 3 o'clock in the morning, these are other hard things to explain. And I've encountered trackways, and I've heard vocalizations, but I've never seen the creature. And that's what keeps me going as well, too. But, I mean, whenever you talk to a lot of these great researchers, Stan Gordon, who's been doing this for over 50 years, has never seen one. Ken Gerhardt and Lyle Blackburn has never seen one. Jeff Meldrum has never seen one. But there's enough circumstantial evidence out there that keeps us going. But I will tell you this. Now, I have had experiences with what the creature that we would call Bigfoot that also seems to be paranormal as well. Last January, not January 2020, but January 2019, outside of my house, there was a trackway, which it's odd because I'm a Bigfoot investigator, and this was one of those days where the temperature was below zero, school was called off, and I went out first thing in the morning, and there was a new blanket of snow on the ground, completely pristine, not even a cat footprint in the snow, no rabbit footprint or anything like that. But right in front of my house was these barefooted tracks. And these weren't large tracks. These were tracks about the size of maybe a 5-year-old child that were barefoot in the snow. But what makes it so curious is not only is this in front of my house, but the trackway had no beginning. Where it started was one right foot, another right foot, and then there was a left foot. So it seems as if whatever was out there took a while to become completely physical. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense to people listening, and I have no way to explain it. I'm just describing you what I encountered. But yeah, so the tracks seemed to come out of nowhere, and it was very odd how they proceeded. You know, it was the right track, and then a left track. The stride was very, very small. We're not talking about a very large creature. It came up to my window, presumably to look into it, and then went over the hill, and then the tracks just disappeared, just like they began. Now, what is interesting is I went back to that site in March of this year, and I found about 100 yards from that particular area, the same tracks. But this time there was only two, again, not very large tracks, and they were, again, barefoot. I don't know how to explain it. It was in a very, very precise location, like I said, about 100 yards from each other, and both not really naturalistic. I mean, you can't really explain this in any way. It wasn't as if something was hiding its tracks. It was as if something materialized and then dematerialized. And I don't like to use these kind of new age type of terms, but there's really no way to describe it. And that also keeps me going as a researcher. As much as I would love to believe there's a flesh and blood cryptid out there that may have some sort of evidence in the archaeological record whether we're dealing with a Gigantopithecus or, some sort of, humanoid dead end in the evolutionary experimentation game, or we're dealing with something that is otherworldly. I really don't know. And at this point, I don't care. But what I do know is that people are encountering these things. I'm coming up with evidence of these things, and I really would like to get to the bottom of it. But the more I research, the more I'm left at the end of the day with a question mark. And I talk to people, or I tell people about this with every book that I write. That I write is ever going to be the definitive case study of a particular thing, because there's no way to conclude this until we have definitive evidence, until we have a body or what have you. So even though that I write a book, it's all going to be speculation and conjecture until we come to a conclusion on this. And quite frankly, we may never come to a conclusion on this stuff.
So do you think with the investigations that you've had, that especially paranormal, cryptic, UFOs, that everything could be moving or going through like a stargate, a portal, some type of gateway?
Well, another, Rodney. Again, these are great questions, and to follow up with a little bit of my experiences. The episode that I had mentioned earlier was we were looking for the creature that we call the Dogman, the werewolf, this kind of new cryptid kid on the block type of thing. There was an area that is a very controlled, it's a flood control area. So it's an area that's very desolate, isolated. There's one way in and one way out, and that way is the exact same way. So we know this area is pristine when we go down there. The nearest house is several miles away, and there's no kind of ambient light going on or anything. This is as wild as you can get in modern day North America. And we were there investigating Dogman reports. And we were walking. Something seemed out of the ordinary. There was some light anomalies going on, enough light anomalies going on for me to take out my camcorder. Immediately, a freshly charged battery begins to drain, also synonymous with ghostly activity. And we were in an area where we knew, hey, we need to get out of this area. It was that instantaneous flight or fight response, and I'm not a fighter, so I wanted to get the heck out of that area. That was something intuitive that we felt. Now, as we turned to go back the trail that we came down on, that is whenever this light anomaly kind of flickered on. It looked as if somebody took a sparkler or took a flare or something of that nature, because the light wasn't a fixed light. It was kind of like a sparkle. And it pulsated, it came on, and then it went off as quickly as it came on. We went to that particular area where it came on, and at that point we heard something following us in the woods. It was paralleling us. We did not see anything. We did hear several audible growls, but the partner that I was with, my research partner that I was with, we both knew that it was time to get out of that area, and whatever it was able to project at least an idea into our minds what it was. Now, this is whenever it gets kind of sci-fi and kind of scary. But after the event, we decided to go into separate rooms, and we were interviewed by other researchers of our team, and we both drew the exact same thing. We saw something that was quadruped, but it was very easily bipedal if it wanted to be. We could see the teeth. We could see these yellow eyes. We knew that there was something very animalistic out there in the woods beside us, and whatever it was, we knew that we could be prey, and it felt as if we were being stalked, and it felt as if whatever this thing was prowling on us was deliberately with some sort of intelligence following us, and so a portal. Possibly. I don't know what else. I mean, how else does something like that happen, and then this kind of event immediately follows? I can't explain it, and I know as a historian going through archaeological records, we see the idea of portals, these kind of swirling motifs throughout history and throughout cultures. We see them in Mesopotamia, we see them in China, and we see them in African art, and we also see them in Ireland, like the Newgrange tomb. Or if you look at places like Avebury or Stonehenge, we see these circular type of monuments. And I am starting to come to the conclusion that these type of monuments that we see made of stone is really demarcations of something that occurred that the ancient peoples may have wanted to either remember or kind of set apart from their world because it was such a fearsome aspect to it.
Well, what's your opinion about the ancient civilizations and with the paranormal or cryptids? Have you found any evidence of what you're researching now compared to 7 to 20,000 years ago that they correlate together?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we can find cave paintings in France going back, maybe 20,000 years ago. But I mean, there are speculations these cave paintings can be as old as 35,000 years old. So we're talking very, very ancient. Really, some of the first artifacts made by humans, some of the first artistic artifacts made by humans that shows the transformation into an animal. We also find places like Australia, a particular being that they call the Wajina, which looks almost like an alien with a helmet on. And, of course, we have the Tule Indians in California that have these kind of Wildman pictographs. We also have from the Columbian River area these stone effigies that look remarkably like carvings of a gorilla, even though there are, of course, supposed to be no gorillas in North America, but it looks surprisingly like that. We have all these very interesting, like I said, the Epic of Gilgamesh. We have the character of Grundle in Beowulf that appears to be like a hairy humanoid as well. So we do have startling hints throughout the historical record, both written and representative of something very strange going on. If you would read in the Beowulf, that was written probably around 700 A.D., but it's an oral tradition, so it's probably much older than that, probably at least 300 or 400 years older than that. But the way it describes the character of Grundle, it looks very much like a modern Bigfoot sighting. It's in the tree line. At twilight, it crosses fields. Very interesting. And what it shows me is that reports from 1,300 years ago is matching reports of what we're saying is out there to this day.
Well, do you think giants have any kind of correlation with Bigfoot?
I'm sorry, you cut out there on the very, very beginning of your question, my friend.
Oh, okay. Giants. Do you think that they have any correlation with the Bigfoot, or are they just two separate beings?
No, I don't think so. I think that we're talking about the same thing, especially whenever we look at the books of the Bible. The word Nephilim is a very interesting term because a lot of people translate the word as the fallen ones. Okay, now that's great. I mean, you could look at it as a verb that means something to physically fall. So that's where they get the word fallen angels from, that they descended from heaven down to a lower plane. That's one way to look at it. But there's a lot of good linguistic evidence to suggest that Nephilim does not mean fallen ones, but it means lower ones, as in something that is a little bit lower than men, but basically does not have a soul. And not has a soul is because it doesn't participate in cultic Judaic functions, if that makes any sense. Basically, it would be a creature that lived outside of mainstream Judaism, if that makes any sense, in the Old Testament worldview. So what it appears to be that they're talking about a very large creature that is not as civilized as the Jews of that particular period, of the Old Testament period. So I think that whenever we read about the Nephilim in the Bible, and it's rightfully translated as giants, these large, very imposing figures, I think that we are talking about humanity's attempt to explain away something that was very, very startling to them. And I think that that's a very good point, Rodney. I think that when we talk about giants, we also have to at least include Bigfoot in the discussion. We don't have to say definitively that giants and Bigfoot are one and the same, but we at least have to include it in the discussion.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, what about your alien research? Have you found, any evidence that they're coming from outer space, or are they something that's actually here that might be actually under the, our ocean?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of different ways that we can look at this. Now, we do know that, especially in hunter-gatherer cultures, the idea of the stars meant a lot. I mean, to understand whenever migrations would happen or whenever we could start planting, it really meant a lot. We needed to know when winter was going to begin and summer was going to begin. So the stars meant everything to these people, and that's the reason we have such good star charts. And they could map. By the time Stonehenge came around, the people were able to map whenever the lunar eclipses were going to occur. So we needed to know what was happening on Earth, and we could see that mirrored in the stars. So it's very rational from a sociological point of view and from a religious point of view to start deifying and personifying the skies. So we could populate it with figures up there because it would make sense to think that people like us controlled the stars up there. Okay, that's one thing. But then we can find medieval representations, very famous Italian medieval representations of what appears to be UFOs, and not only UFOs, but it seems that they're piloted by something as well too. There's a great one, if any of your listeners want to look up. You can just look up Italian fresco UFOs, and you can see one. Now, it's interesting because it appears to be that one of the pilots is piloting the sun, and the other is piloting the moon. The moon figure is feminine. The sun figure is masculine. And, of course, at one time, we believed that all the spheres and all the stars in the sky had an attending angel. So that's one way to look at it. I mean, from a historical point of view, if I was going to write a paper that was going to be presented in an academic format, I could explain that away, okay? But it also, the way the sun was represented and the way the moon was represented also had a craft-like quality that seemed to supersede basic knowledge at that time. It seemed that the human imagination could not account for this, so it might have been a representation of actually what was seen. Alexander the Great reported seeing flying shields whenever he was doing his conquest into India. There is literature from ancient Egypt that talks about these kind of circular objects appearing in the sky. And again, like I said, when we return to Australia, which is really one of the oldest continuous cultures on the planet, they have not only a rich history of this otherworldly type of beings in their dream time and in their cosmology as well, but they have illustrated it to the point that it looks like, going to the whole ancient astronaut theory, it looks like, from at least a cursory point of view, that we are dealing with an encounter by a very early culture with what would be described as extraterrestrials. We do see this in North America. We know that places like the Serpent Mound in Chillicothe, Ohio, has a lot of alignments with the stars and planets. We know that Mystery Hill up in New Hampshire has a lot of weird alignments as well. And we also know that some of the mounds that were uncovered, like the Grave Creek Mound in West Virginia, had a body apparently inside of it whenever it was excavated, and it apparently was the body of what they described as one of the Nephilim, a giant. So we do have this kind of interconnection with the other world or the stars or what have you throughout cultures around the world.
Well, what is your opinion about the ancient astronaut theory?
Okay, yes, that's right. Because you know what, I was going off on a tangent there, and I forgot about your one point of that. So where do they come from? Absolutely. Okay, So I wrote a book because there's a lot of things happening around the Chestnut Ridge where I live. So my first book on the supernatural and on my research was called The Unexplained World of the Chestnut Ridge. And that's really where I do a lot of my research now. I can actually see the Chestnut Ridge out my front window, as a matter of fact. I still live very close to there. So as a writer and as somebody that, gathering all these different types of stories, if we're dealing with another race that's extraterrestrial, then they would have to travel millions of years to get here, unless they have other ways of doing it. Even if you could reach light speed, it would still take forever to get here. And it really doesn't make sense unless you're using wormholes or such. But my theory is starting to come together as if we're not dealing with something extraterrestrial, but maybe interdimensional. Or there's another word, and I didn't invent this word, although it's a great word. What about the idea of an ultra-terrestrial, something of this world that we simply do not understand, that it's beyond our knowledge? There's a lot of different things, and you talked about something that's, underwater. If you look at some of the First Nation and Native American Indian accounts, especially around the Great Lakes, every one of those cultures have stories of civilizations that lie below the water, and people see these underwater UFOs moving along, not only in the Great Lakes, but in the oceans as well. And it's really, the world of the extraterrestrial is very difficult because it's so entwined with so many different things. But I do not think that there is a space program, from a world, light years away, that is spending their tax dollars or what have you, to come and research Earth. It doesn't make logical sense to me. What makes sense is that we're dealing something that is from another dimension that overlies our dimension, or some part of our world, some sort of naturally occurring thing in our world that is either evolved beyond what we know or has been hidden for such a long period of time that almost maybe even nearly forgotten. So that's whenever things like Atlantis comes into play or Mu comes into play, and it's very speculative. And it also kind of sounds like, you're, kind of like a raving lunatic at that point as well, too. But I'm just telling you suggestions, and I'm trying to connect all the dots whenever I look at all these kind of theories from around the world. But to me as a researcher, I think that we're dealing with something that is very much a part of the world. It's just unknown. So I'm leaning more along the lines of something with an interdimensional quality than an extraterrestrial quality.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. And the reason why is because we was on an investigation many years ago, me and one teammates, and he's a cop, and we were walking a path. It was paved, so you can hear us as we're walking because we were using a recorder. You can hear click, 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 and then all of a sudden it went from just they're clicking over shoes to it sounded like we were in a huge building with the echo, and sounded like we was walking on a catwalk. And we went from click, click, click to doing, 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 doing. And this happened for 20 seconds. When I played it back to Mike later that week, he said, it sounded like we walked into a building or on a catwalk. I'm like, that's exactly what it sounds like to me. It's what I think. So do you think that we walked through maybe some type of interdimensional cross wave throughout?
Yeah, see, and I've experienced things like this as well. And I've spoken to a lot of researchers that have very, very similar experiences. It's almost as if you were at the perfect place at the perfect time, and there was a melding of two different worlds. Is that kind of like what you're suggesting, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, exactly. I know what you're talking about, and I've spoken to researchers before where they said that the woods seemed to shift, or things seemed to move. Things were not quite right. Like things were certainly slightly out of place. I've listened to these stories many times, and I've experienced these things as many times as well too. I think that what you've experienced there is, and of course we cannot say definitively what it is, so we always have to put an asterisk on this, but it seems that you have experienced what other people have experienced, and that is some sort of collision between two different realities. One reality where the physics of this world doesn't make sense in that world. Right? I mean, that's basically what we're talking about. We're talking about something that is slightly similar, but just enough off that we can tell that we're off. Okay. Now, not only that, but when we talk about all these kind of interdimensional ideas and things like that, have you ever spoken to a ghost researcher that is went into a haunted house or a haunted location and come up with photographic evidence of the ghost, and it looks startling like what we would call a gray? Now, I've seen this on numerous occasions, and that is something very difficult as well, too. Again, talking back when we first started this program with the idea how everything is fitted together. Is it possible that the things that we call ghosts are at times these interdimensional creatures like the gray that is moving around within a particular location, sometimes able to manipulate the environment, sometimes even being able to be seen in some sort of nebulous form, but we are used to calling these things ghosts when actually they are something totally different? There was one.
The reason why I agree with, I don't interrupt you. We was on an investigation that we actually heard footsteps on the roof. And, when we went outside to look and see if anybody was on the roof of the house, we could see a light just like shoot up into the sky that shouldn't have been there.
Right.
So we couldn't answer.
Yep.
We didn't know here or what.
Yep. Yeah. Now, this is the other thing. I did not investigate this, but I spoke with people that did investigate it, so I can't take any credit for this one at all. And I did not see anything firsthand. But I spoke to some ghost researchers that were investigating a haunted house, and they were getting a lot of orb activity within that house. Now, one of the investigators ran out of batteries, so they went out to their car to get recharged. And in the sky was a glowing orb, which, like a UFO sighting, And they called back and they said, "Are you having orb activity in the house?" And the affirmative, yes, they were having orb activity. And you know what? Whenever that object in the sky disappeared, the orb activity stopped as well inside the house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so it's somewhat, even when it comes up to extraterrestrials or aliens or so forth, UFOs, I think they fall into the category also with the paranormal and cryptids.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that so many people go out there because we think of our space program and we think of everything that has to go in with that. That if you are traveling, if you're traveling in space, you have to obey certain laws of physics. Okay, that is a must. Okay, Einstein suggested we cannot go any faster than the speed of light. But if that's the case, then we're talking about things that are traveling for years and years, sometimes a million years to get here. So it makes more sense to me that what we're dealing with is something much closer that is able to interact with us without bending as much physical laws as it would be for interstellar space travel. We know, at least the scientific community understands, that other dimensions do exist. We don't know exactly what they are or how they happen, but it seems to be that there are other realities underlining our reality. Now, if there are creatures within those realities, can they bleed over into our reality from time to time. And I think it's absolutely. I think that is the answer. I think it absolutely does happen.
I agree. I think we bleed over to them, and they bleed over to us.
Oh, you know what? See, this is another great point that you're making here too. And rarely do I get on shows when we talk about this kind of stuff. When we talk about the idea of bleeding over into their time, see, that's something that we don't talk about very often. I mean, people go missing all the time, so we don't know if these missing people. A lot of people like to think of the theory that they're attacked by a certain cryptid or something, but we never think that the disappearances could be that they actually bled over into another dimension and they can't get away. So the idea of seeing a Bigfoot that kind of disappears in front of you, is it because it is able to go into a portal or what have you, or manipulate time and space in such a way that it can, transcend our level of being into another level of being? To me, that makes sense. I don't know how it works, but it makes sense to me. And the idea of also bleeding over, I mean, there are a lot of hauntings, especially in places that have a very old tradition and old history, like in England, where people have seen Roman soldiers marching past them. Now that is the thing: are they seeing a residual haunt, or have they crossed over into another dimension where they're actually seeing that something that's taking place right there, and they would be considered the ghost in that dimension?
Exactly.
Yeah. So maybe we, from time to time, haunt those worlds, and maybe from time to time, our aircraft and our spacecraft are the UFOs in that world.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I've often thought that. I really have, and also I wonder if that we might be looking at some kind of rip in time, that we're able, like you're talking about the Romans. Maybe we're actually watching the Romans back, when they were at their height, or maybe we're watching the Battle of Gettysburg as it was actually going on at that time.
That's right. Yes, because, I mean, look, I've done research to figure out what the half-life for a ghost is. Like, how long can a ghost be around? Because nobody ever talks about, like, seeing a caveman ghost. Nobody talks about that kind of stuff. But
exactly.
people do talk about seeing, like, Egyptians and things of that nature. So is it possible? And I think that this is a perfect thing to talk about, because very rarely does people ever talk about this in a public forum like a radio show, Rodney. So I think this is a good point. So do ghosts exist, or do we get a glimpse of their world? I think that's a very, very salient point that we need to talk about. Are we kind of bleeding over into their world, and we are allowed a glimpse of what's going on? Like you said, the Romans at their heights, or a Victorian girl walking through the garden or what have you. It's very possible that is the case, that these are not hauntings in a particular sense, but we are kind of looking. And now that doesn't apply to every single case. I've investigated intelligent hauntings where these, whatever these spirits are, know very much that you're alive and they're not alive. I've witnessed things like this before. So we have to take this on a case-to-case basis. But I am saying that I do believe that from time to time we are allowed in some way to have a rip in time where we can look and see something happening that happened thousands of years ago. Or, in the case of the Loch Ness Monster, is it possible sometimes these creatures can slip in and out of time as well, too?
Yep, that's something else I was going to ask you about, was where you got your lake monsters, and where people have also saw different type of creatures sailing across the continent, or between continents.
Right.
Do you think that those type of creatures are slipping in and out of some type of time warp also, or another different reality?
Yeah, I think that's extremely possible. We have to understand that time that we know it does not exist. That's a human construction. You know, we deal with the Earth rotating and orbiting the sun. That's how we deal with time. But it's not real. You know, this is something to set clocks by. So time really does not, and also time from one place to another doesn't occur at the same rate. You know, if you're on an airplane, the time in an airplane is different than the time on Earth, just simply for the reasons of the way it's moving through space. You know, all this stuff really, you know, from that kind of level is kind of it puts us in our place. You know, it really does. It makes us a lot more humble, I think, as a species when we think that we know everything. But I think that, like, you know, certain Bigfoot encounters, whenever they're seen at one point and then they become invisible, or UFOs that vanish in the blink of an eye, I think that we're dealing with something that exists in a particular space, but out of time, if you will. So it is almost as if it's bleeding over into our world. Absolutely, Rodney. I think that, and you know what, in the future, and we've covered a lot of topics tonight, it would be interesting to see in the future if we could just discuss one of these particular topics, because you have a whole show here, my friend, on just one of these topics.
I know. Believe me, I'll have you back. You want to come back on? We'll come back on and just focus on one topic. I've had other people that have deal and research like you in so many different areas, and I try to, you know, jump on as much as I can, and then they're all pretty much the same as you. Like, we'll come back and we'll talk about one topic.
Yeah, well, the thing is, though, and I appreciate it, because this is kind of like our introduction to each other, you know. So this is kind of like if we were dating. This is kind of like we have to learn about as much as we can about each other at the first time while we're sitting around having dinner, right? But yeah, I think that the questions that you pose, though, my friend, is ones that really need to be fleshed out. And of course, I'm not the expert on all these things. I mean, but I think that when we talk about the world of the paranormal, and we talk about the world of the supernatural, and we talk about research, look, if you don't keep an open mind and you go in there and say extraterrestrials are behind the UFO phenomenon, then we throw all this other stuff out. Or if we say that there's no such thing as a bleed over in dimensions, then you're always going to be looking for a flesh and blood Loch Ness monster. You know, and that really kind of hog-ties us. It doesn't make any sense as a researcher. We have to take all these things into consideration, and we say there's no Loch Ness monster because we've never found a body. And then we can say, well, we do know from the fossil record that these things existed, and is it possible that the area of Loch Ness has a penchant for allowing things in and out of another dimension from time to time? See, it makes more sense to me to talk about that kind of stuff than to say, oh, that can't exist because we don't have it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many people out there. Look, I've talked to people that they want to have UFOs. They want them to be flown by little green men. They want Bigfoot to be this creature that's out there, you know, eating deer out in the fields and looking in people's windows and all this stuff. Heck, I would like to have that as well, too. But I'm just saying that all the years that I've done this, I'm looking back on all the great researchers throughout the history of cryptozoology. We've never been able to find a body, but I know from all the people that I've interviewed that the vast majority are not making these things up. So what's left? You know, we either have a very elusive, very intelligent animal like the Bigfoot out there, which I think is very, very possible, or we're dealing with something that only occupies some of its time on our level, our plane of being. For a limited time, and it goes in and out from time to time. That's why we have no definitive proof.
Well, I hate to jump another topic on you, but vampires. How do you research, and what type of research do you do for a vampire?
Excellent point. Okay, so vampires has been one of these things I've always enjoyed as a kid, you know, because not only would my mother take me Bigfoot hunting, but she would also on Saturday nights allow me to take a nap, and she would wake me up at 11:30 so we could watch the scary movies on television. I had a great upbringing, my friend. Of course, nowadays I think they might call that child abuse, and they would have probably called CYS on her. But, at the time, this was a great way to be. I was chilling with my mom. My mom and dad were divorced whenever I was very young, so I was raised by my mom. This was great bonding time, and I do the same thing with my kids as well, too. So we would watch all these great shows with werewolves and vampires, and I've always had a love for these things. But to take that love and scaffold it into my world of research, that's another story. So what I do is I go back, and I try to go back as far back in human history as I can and see if we have anything out there that looks similar to a vampire. And sure enough, we do. And the farthest I could point back was 14,000 years ago. So this was a time in England whenever there were more people dying at that place than being born. So this was kind of like the land of the living dead. This was right at the end of the last ice age. It was very hard going. This was a time whenever humanity was trying to take foot, and if things didn't go right, we as a species may very, very soon go extinct. And England was no different. This was a very difficult place for humans to survive, and many more died than did survive. But what is interesting is there's a place called Goes Cave, and that's in the Cheddar Cave region. That's where we get our word cheddar cheese from. And in that cave was found, it was excavated, and they found a place where game animals were processed, reindeer, antelope, and things of that nature were all processed in this place. So this cave kind of acted as a processing plant. Now, what's interesting is in those bones, those discarded bones, was human remains, 2 children and 1 adolescent. And there was no reverence to these bones. These bones were used just as food. And I'll give you a good word there. This is called cannibalism. These people were consumed not for religious purposes, but solely because they tasted good and they were going to be calories that were needed, okay, because it was so difficult. Humans are much easier to hunt than animals, okay, and they don't fight back as much. So we know that in Goes Cave, people were consumed. Now, what takes it to the vampiric level is that the skulls of these people were kind of fashioned into chalices, and blood was consumed from these chalices because residue was found within the skulls. So we know that there was some sort of consumption of human blood in this place. And it was probably done solely for nutritional purposes. That very ancient man was finding it so difficult to live that they had to resort to cannibalism and consuming human blood. So we know that this happened at the very dawn of who we are as human beings, making our way in the world. So as we go through time, we see other cultures dealing with the notion of cannibalism as well, too. Places like Egypt, places like Mesopotamia. And we have this great figure of Lilith, which was in Judaic folklore the first wife of Adam. But she did not want to be subjugated by him. She wanted to be on the same level as Adam. So she was cast out of the Garden of Eden, and she met from different sources. She either met a fallen angel or she met Satan himself. They procreated and had these little demon children who, because she was thrown out of Eden, their vendetta against the human race was to feed on the children of the human race. So very early on, the main prey of the vampire was children. And we even see that reflected in Bram Stoker whenever the character of Lucy is seen with a child whenever she returns to her grave. So we do see, repercussions of this throughout history. But it's odd to see so many cultures around the world having the vampiric influence. Now, I wrote a book called On Vampires about 4 years ago. Jonathan Downs from the Center for Fortean Zoology over in Devon, England, actually published it. I was very, very proud to have it published. So if you wanted to look into it, you can get it at bookstores. But I traced the formation of the vampire from the Goes Cave the whole way up to the present day. But and I also included a chapter in there on the possibility of some sort of cryptid being responsible for some vampire sightings as well too. There's a lot of creatures like there's bats. The idea of the vampire changing into a bat is a very old notion as well. The shape shifting. And I think that it's possible there might have been some sort of cryptic animal out there, maybe even a cryptic bat or maybe some other kind of creature that was flying that we've never recognized before that was consuming human blood, and that fed into the vampire legend as well, too. But vampires are such a myriad of different topics or different subjects all thrown into one. So when we talk about the vampire, we're looking at a composite character. We're not looking at just one thing. By the time we hit the 21st century, the vampire is, it's the Nosferatu. It is Vlad the Impaler. It is cannibals. It is shape-shifting understandings. It's a whole bunch of different things into this one type of what becomes an archetype, but there's so many things that goes into the vampire. Again, the vampire is easily an hour-and-a-half show as well, too. But the reason why it's so cool to bring this up is people still report vampire encounters to this day. And vampires are a lot easier to find than Bigfoot. If you want to find yourself a vampire, you can go to your Google search engine, type in Vampire Club. Now, of course, not now with the coronavirus, but, you could go to New York City, you can go to New Orleans, you could go to Tokyo, you can go to almost any big city around the world and find yourself a club where people in that club identify themselves as vampires. So that's, if you're looking for a cryptid, that's a no-brainer. Or if you're looking for something that goes bump in the night in a very tangible form, there's plenty of people out there that want to consume human blood, and there's plenty of people out there that will want to serve as a host for those people as well, too. A little bit too kinky for my particular taste, my friend, but there's people out there like that.
Yeah, me too. And plus, I'm too big and I'm too big and plump. They look at me and be like, "Wow, what a meal!" But they'd be like, "Pass the barbecue sauce because this big old boy's going to taste good."
Hey, but I'll tell you what. You're in Kentucky, right?
No, I'm in Virginia.
Oh, in Virginia, that's right. I'm sorry about it. I don't know why I thought about Kentucky, because some of the finest barbecue I've ever had was in Kentucky. And gosh darn it, Rodney, you made me hungry here at almost 11:30 at night. But yeah, hey, to teach their own. If they want to bring out the barbecue sauce, let it be.
Well, does these vampires still, or do you know if they? I know they're drinking the blood, but. Or do you know of any like cannibalistic feeding going on today?
Oh, sure. You see this a lot in serial killer cultures. Richard Ramirez identified himself as a vampire. Every now and then, every so many years, you'll find, some sort of teenage vampire cult that takes us to the next level, and they'll kill people and consume the blood and everything, and it becomes very salacious and appears on Dateline TV. This kind of stuff happens every day. But what happens with the vampire, it has now evolved into subcategories. For instance, the typical vampire that drinks human blood, that is called the sanguine vampire, for the blood eating. But, there's also the psychic vampire. And I think everybody's experienced a psychic vampire. My ex-wife was a psychic vampire. You walk into the room and you feel all of your energy drained out of you. I think everybody's experienced something like that. But there are people out there that believe that they don't feed on the human blood, but they feed on the emotions or the psyche of a human being. And you also have these environmental vampires, which I think is going to be a next big thing here, because it's a very new age tree hugger generator type of vampire, where they feed off of the natural elements like thunderstorms, or off of the pulses, the natural synchronicities in nature. So you have these people that feel that as if they can draw their power from the world around them, from the environment. There's no killing going on, very, very benign in nature. But you have sexual vampires, you have, and I'm sure I'm going to miss a few of them, but now you have all these different subcategories of vampires where they feel that they need a human being, or they need something, some sort of host to feed off of, but it's not as horribly violent as bloodletting.
Well, that's good, I think.
Oh, that's absolutely good, yeah. But I think that, look, have you ever walked into a room and there's one person in there that is the mood killer? Do you know what I mean? You go in there and they just kind of suck the life out of you. That is what you would call a psychic vampire, and there's people out there that believe that they are deliberately drawing that energy out of you.
Yeah, I know a couple of people like it, and I know they're doing it on purpose. Because I could be.
That's what I'm talking about. Yep.
And I'm one of these personalities. I'm loud and like to laugh, carry on, have a good time. And as soon as I'm around these people, I'm just like drained. I'm like, And then
exactly.
People have to be bouncing around, and I'm like, I gotta go. I need to go lay down.
I agree with you, my friend. That's exactly right. So, yeah, looking at it in those kind of perspectives, it does make a very credible sense to me. Again, we're talking about something that is, paranormal. There's somebody that's out there that is able to feed off of a life force of some kind. So we're not talking about something that's mundane. We're talking about something that's supernatural again. So, yeah, vampires are always going to have that supernatural aspect to them. And think about it this way. Even when we talk about the incident in the cave 14,000 years ago, how these people had to perceive these other human beings coming out and feeding upon them. Look, they came out of a cave. Bats come out of caves. It's something underground. So they probably seem very monstrous coming at you to prey upon you. So a lot of these archetypes that I look into, like vampires or like witches or even werewolves, at the end of the day, we like to make them into monsters because we don't want to admit that human beings are capable of the heinous type of actions that they're capable of doing. We as human beings don't like to think that we can do such monstrous things. So instead of calling them people, we make them into monsters, and we put a mask on them to hide their identity because it's too painful to see ourselves looking back at us in that mirror.
No, that's a good point. Well, where you're talking about 14,000 years ago, I've had some people on that's talked about, this planetary catastrophe that happened. And also that, I guess in Europe and Russia and other places across the globe that have these deep underground cave network systems that they could put 20, 30, 40,000 people in. I don't know if you've done any research on that or know anything about that, but don't that kind of tie in with what you're talking about with the 14,000 years ago with the vampires?
Yeah, it does. And I don't want this to be boring because I do not like boring stuff. But what happened 14,000 years ago, this was a time at the end of the last ice age, and this was a period called the Younger Dryas period. Guys, I promise you will not be tested on this, but it might seem a little boring, but it's very important in our discussion here. So what happens at the end of the last ice age, things start warming up. It warms up to the point that we start seeing agriculture happening around the world. It's so warm that people can now settle down, and not only settle down, but like in the Caucasus Mountains of Russia, they start building civilizations. Like we're talking about stone civilizations 14,000 years ago, and then the bottom drops out, and then the Younger Dryas period comes in. In a matter of decades, we're not talking centuries, we're talking about in a matter of decades, the temperature plunges again. Farming is no longer capable. These people that were settled now have to become hunter-gatherers again, and now they are at the they're at the whim of nature once again. They went from a stabilized time to a very unstable time. So as a researcher, what makes sense to me is the idea of things like lost civilizations, Atlantis. It makes sense to me that it's at this time, because you can imagine if somebody started to put together a town, a fortified town using rock and things like that, and then it was abandoned. And 100 years later, a group of hunter-gatherers come upon this. It would be inexplicable. It would be coming like on to something that landed from outer space, because they're used to, living in lean-tos, and now they come to something that is so otherworldly. It just doesn't make sense. Now, the Younger Dryas period only lasts about 500 years. Very, very short little mini ice age. But it came upon us so quickly that there was no preparation for this. So there was really no kind of oral tradition about the world changing. It was instantaneous. Like I said, a matter of decades. So I think this so disrupted who we are as a species that things like vampires and things like werewolves and things like even Bigfoot really impacted us, because we're thrown back out into the natural world. And if Bigfoot didn't exist, well, it was going to exist now, because you're dealing with a world around you that you don't know what's going on. So these people may well have encountered a creature that we call Bigfoot, and that's now part of our cultural memory. And that creature no longer exists now, but it's with us genetically because it was passed down that way. The idea of the dog man, we had to now compete with wolves for survival. And a lot of our hunting experience and our techniques is gathered from the way wolves interact with each other. They're very intelligent animals. So in my opinion, if I'm going to go strictly scientific and I'm going to present this as a paper to be reviewed by science and put into a magazine, I would say that our brush with the other begins the Younger Dryas period, when we are thrown back out into the world and we have to deal with that natural world. That might seem a little bit boring, but I think, if you're going to go completely into this realm of research into the cryptozoological and the paranormal and things, we have to look at the history as well, too. So we have this kind of, in our human race, we have this kind of hurdle that we have to overcome. And in overcoming that hurdle, we had to deal with things that were very monstrous to us. Now, again, like I said, we're going to go full circle here and come right back to the beginning. I'm saying that those things that were monstrous to them are also monstrous to us now, because we are interacting with the same thing all these thousands of years later, and we still cannot explain what that is.
That was well said.
Well, I appreciate that.
Well, I'm glad I'm not going to be tested for it, because I suck at this.
Yes, no. I mean, look. I want to be as thorough as possible. It's great to sit down and read a book and read about one sighting after another, but whenever you put into a context that what we're dealing with is something that's been going on for thousands and thousands of years, hey, it starts. We start connecting the dots, then, don't we? I mean, it starts forming some sort of a pattern. And we really can delve even deeper when we realize that they've always been with us. And now let's try to shed a little bit of light on what those things are.
And I agree. I know with all the guests I've had, they all come full circle with this, and I agree with it, that we do need to shine light on this. This is something that's I think is part of us, and has been a part of our way of life for such a long time, thousands and thousands of years. And, with all the lost ancient technology as far as how we've built, I do think that mankind has some type of memory loss, some kind of amnesia, and I think we're slowly getting it back, but I'm just scared that we're going to destroy everything before we actually get it back.
Oh, I agree with you, my friend. I agree. Never in the course of human history have we ever been so unkind to each other or to the world around us than now. And I think that what's going on right now truly is a wake-up call. You can look at it as a great catastrophe, or you can look at it as nature's way of putting us in time out, okay? We really need to rethink how we deal with each other and with our planet and all the species on the planet. This transcends politics. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, liberal, it doesn't make any sense to me. We all have to get our collective heads out of our butts and start saying the world around us matters, that we're borrowing this world from our children and their children. We need to get things back on track again, and we really need to get in touch as who we are as human beings and stop consuming and start producing things that are going to help instead of hurt.
I couldn't say it no better, and that's the truth. I agree with that 1,000%. And the bad thing is, I live in an area that is very closed-minded, and they constantly want to battle and argue. It's like you can't have an opinion that's different from them, or any idea that's different from them, and they're until they're ready to fight. And it's wrong. We've got to stop. We're all the same here. We're all human beings. We all are trying to live and breathe and take care of our families. Stop the bullshit.
That's right.
I hate to put it that way, but it's true.
That's right. Oh, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, look, what's going on right now, and you mentioned this at the very top of the program, look, let's just stay inside for a little bit longer. I know it's hurting the economy. It's hurting my financial economy here in the house, But let's get this world right again. Once everything is right, let's go back and not screw it up again. I think we can all do that. I think that we can all sit down, wait another month or so. Things will eventually open up. I cannot wait for baseball to start. I'm looking forward to football, but I'm also willing to sit on my couch again and for another month or 2 months or whatever it takes. So whenever I go out there, I don't have to worry about my kids catching something that's going to kill them from a shopping cart. But let's just wait. Let's reevaluate who we are. And more importantly, have you noticed that the world is healing itself as we are staying inside? You can now see the Los Angeles skyline. Dolphins are returning to the canals in Venice. Things are cleaning up. The Earth is going through some sort of very slow renewal process. Let's let everything go back into synchronicity. Let's live within that vibration, and then instead of stepping out of that vibration, everybody hold hands, sing along, and let's help each other. Instead of making bombs, let's all get together and make cures, and I think we'll be in a much better place from here on out.
I agree 100% with that. Yeah, and as you said, it's like, to me, the way I see this, it's like the Earth said, okay, it's time for you all to come inside, to go inside. Yep. About what we've all been doing for the past 100+ years, and
That's
let
right.
me heal.
Well, exactly. Now, I was on Cat Ward's program not too long ago when I talked about this. So if somebody heard me on that program too, I don't want to seem like I'm, the same dead animal or what have you. But no, what you said is absolutely true. We need to allow healing to happen, okay? There is a theory out there that the rainforest produced this virus to get rid of an invasive species. And that invasive species is us. I mean, that's one of the theories that's going on out there. I'm talking about a mainstream medical theory that this was the way for the Earth to attack a very annoying parasite that was getting on its nerves, okay? Now, if we think about that, then I think that we can change our overall outlook, because the next thing it might give us is going to be far worse than this.
Oh, again, I agree.
Yep.
I'm one of these people, when I was younger, and even still yet today, I love the earth. I mean, I plant every year. I hike. I'm up in the mountains. I may not go very far like I used to when I was younger, but I don't know. She breathes. She gives us life. We owe the earth so much. If people would just look at that Voyager picture of the speck, of the blue speck that is us, and see how actually small we really are in the vastness of space. Maybe people would give a damn about our planet we live on.
Well, let's look at it this way again, my friend. Every culture around the world sees the earth as its mother, and that is absolutely true. This is the womb from which we were born, and this is the grave in which we will be buried. Let's take care of it. Yep, let's take care of it.
It ain't hard. That kind of reminds me when I drove a truck. I drive a truck across country, all over the country, and I know this is going to sound bad, but I'd stop at a truck stop, fill up, and all that, and I have to go to the restroom. I go to the restroom, and I'm like, oh my God, I wouldn't even. You can't touch nothing in here. And I'm thinking when I'm leaving, I would not go in somebody's house and do that. Why is these grown men, that I know they're grown men, because I see them all around here, will go into a restroom and destroy it and do some of the nasty stuff that they've done. If they do it to a bathroom, they're doing it outside to the planet. They don't care. It's all about me and right now my needs.
Right. They've lost respect, and that respect is going to be taught to them by a very stern mother, and that mother happens to be the earth in which they live on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is true. This is true, and I hate to see anybody die. I do, but there's a lot of people right now that's protesting these capitals, and I mean they're shoulder to shoulder, and I know that a bunch of them are going to die just to prove a point.
Yeah. Virginia is one of my favorite states. We vacation, like our vacation spot is Virginia Beach, and not only the coastal side, but all Virginia Beach. All Virginia. I really, truly love that state. I love the history. I love everything about it, the scenery, the wildlife, everything. Look, what's going on down there is there's a lot of people who are very upset because the governor is being so really conservative about opening this place up. He wants to be very, very careful, and people are becoming very militant about this. I think that whenever lives are in danger, I would rather see, it's sad to say, but I'd rather see somebody depending upon welfare for a couple months until they get their feet back on the ground rather than one person to die. It makes no sense that somebody would have to die for an economy to go on. We are the only species on this planet that has to pay to live on this planet. That's the other thing that we have to consider as well, too. We have to buy our food. We have to, afford a place to stay and everything like that. We're the only species out there. We need to rethink. Like now people are talking about, let's, hold off on, rents and let's freeze mortgages and everything like that. The reason why that is because it's so unnatural. We are so concerned with capitalism. We're so concerned with the dollar that we have forgotten anybody. So at this point in quarantine and isolation, the homeless person is on the same level now as, the movie star. We don't look in awe at movie stars and sports figures anymore because we're all inside doing the exact same thing and fighting over toilet paper. We need to keep this idea in our heads when everything opens back up, and we have to care about our fellow man. I don't want to sound like I'm on a pulpit or anything like that, but unless we change dramatically this coronavirus is going to be a very small thing. That's what's going to face us 50 years from now or 100 years from now. Wait till you start clearing out some more of the Amazon and start encountering things down there that is deep in these forests that mankind was never supposed to see. Or wait till we dig up the cure for cancer and we burn it over as we make room to graze cattle. That's the other fear that I have as well, too, that not only we're going to unleash a virus, but we're going to destroy things that are beneficial to us as well.
Mm-hmm. And also, the melting of Antarctica. Look at the bugs and viruses and all kinds of creepy things that could be coming out of that once it melts. Released. Yeah, that's with global warming. We are now seeing ice melting in ways that we never thought possible. And with this ice melt, we're also exposing organisms that has been under the ice for tens of thousands of years. And guess what, folks? These organisms and these viruses are alive, and they're now coming out into the air. This sounds like a very bad sci-fi TV show, but again, folks, unless we are careful, we have no idea what we're dealing with. We're having a difficult time dealing with the coronavirus right now from 2019. Try to deal with a virus that's been under ice for 35,000 years. Now we're talking some real problems. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I'm surprised that we haven't dug anything up. I know Pennsylvania is the same as like West Virginia and Virginia with the coal. I'm surprised we haven't dug up something that's wiped us out with all the coal that we dug out of the ground. Exactly. One good thing about the coal fields, though, is we got to them whenever they were in the fossilized state. Now, these things with the ice cover, we're dealing with things that were, pretty quickly covered up with ice, and that acts as a preservative. So luckily, Pennsylvania and much of America was underwater at one time, so we had fossilization of everything. We got to be careful of these places that are cold because fossilization never took place. What happened out there was like a refrigerator, so we have preservation taking place in those areas. Well, that's true, and it's I don't know. I know I'll post my opinions about certain political figures, and if something's really interesting, no matter what I post about, shows or any of my investigations or events and so forth, I might get quite a few people that will respond. But let me post up something about Donald Trump that people don't like, and I catch you mortal. And I'm like, it's my opinion. I'm not debating you. I'm not arguing with you. This is my opinion. Just like it's your opinion. You like Trump. You love him. You think he's doing great. That's fine. I disagree with that. But, no, I actually had to delete a guy last night. Me and him, he kept trying to bait me in. And I'm like, enough of this. Enough. I just deleted him. That's right. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of anything that divides people. I'm not a big fan of Republicans. I'm not a big fan of Democrats because it naturally divides people. I think that we need to have somebody come up there and say, I am not concerned about these particular things or these particular things. I'm concerned about you as an American, and I could care less what your beliefs are. That would be fantastic if something like that would happen. I agree 100%. That would be a great day. Whether it be a man or a woman, I don't care. If they just get up there and say, this is what we need to take care of everybody in America and then the world. Yes, we are the leaders of the world, but we got to take care of ourselves first. And right now, the world is doing a great job of taking care of themselves, and we look terrible. We're dying. Preach on, Rodney. You're absolutely right. Look, I've had these kind of discussions with people as well too. How can you, as an American, say that we should not have free education and free health care? Because don't you want to have an educated, healthy population? That makes no sense to me that people fight about this kind of stuff.
look, if you want to go to Harvard, that's fine. Make that school expensive and all that other kind of stuff. But at least provide some colleges where some kid right off the streets can go to for free, okay? Same way with healthcare. Give everybody basic healthcare. If you want to buy yourself $900 a month blood pressure pills, that's fine. Let me have my $23 a month blood pressure pills for free, you know? Look, everybody's always going to say, I want something better. Well, let them have better. But please, for the love of God, provide basic education and basic health care, because don't you want people to be able to read and write and function in society, and don't you want them to be healthy as well as while they're doing it?
No, they don't. No,
they don't. They don't because
no
it's
money.
about the Yep, no money. Which leads to the point is, could you imagine if there was a cure for cancer? If there was a cure for, cancer is very profitable because you treat every symptom that goes along with it and everything. If you could find the cure, think about how many people would go out of business.
Oh yeah, yep.
I
told family members, that's got cancer, and they're worried. I'm like, I'm sorry. They may have the cancer, but two, they're not going to give us the cure because one, they're not going to make any money off of curing you.
That's right. No money at all. Nope.
There's no money into curing you unless they charge, I don't know, $500 million for that one person.
Right. Yeah, and that's the other something. Yep. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm lucky because I went to the University of Pittsburgh, and that's where they found the polio vaccine. Jonas Salk down at the University of Pittsburgh. And, of course, this was before my time. But, in reading the things that he said, he was interviewed, and they said, you could become a very rich man up for this. And he said, the sun doesn't charge for its light. This is something that's meant for the benefit of humanity. It has to be free. These things are probably words that you'll never hear spoken again. That's a terrible thing to say, but to think that somebody put that much time and energy to find a cure that helps so many people. My grandmother was a polio victim, and to think that somebody like that was able to come up with a cure and say, I'm going to give it to you for free because it helps you. I'm not going to get rich from this, but it helps you as a human being.
And what upsets me about all that, what you just spoke of, is this new wave of people not vaccinating their children.
That's right.
Here you had a scientist like that, gave everything for free to save people's lives from polio, and not counting all the other vaccines. But people are like, nope, they're poisoning them. That's poison.
Right. Yep.
No, you're actually causing these diseases to come back.
That's right. Yeah, I don't understand that either, man. I don't understand why anybody would do that. It makes no logical sense to me. But, people are out there doing it.
Yeah, they are.
Yep.
I got some family members there, were big on it. And I've told them, I'm like, well, keep your people away from me. If they ain't been vaccinated, stay away from me.
That's right.
Like, well,
exactly.
That's what I mean. I'm like, hey, I'm diabetic. How am I supposed to know that I ain't going to catch that's going to kill me?
That's right. I agree.
I agree. Making fun of me right now because I stay at the house and don't hardly go out any with this coronavirus. And I'm like, my doctors, I've got 3 doctors, and all 3 of them told me, Rod, you get it, you're going to die. I mean, straight up.
Yep.
How many doctors look at?
Yep. We have to be concerned about the least of us, the least among us. We have to be concerned about that.
Yes. And just because you're young, healthy, and strong, and you can go out, that's great. And if it's just like a cold tea or a little flu, that's great. But you've got mamas, papas, mommies, daddies, and people that have illnesses like diabetes and asthma and so forth, and they're all over the place. And you just walk into a room with one person, and you could kill them because you're being reckless.
Absolutely could. That's right. Yep.
That's
okay. Look, we covered all gamut tonight, my friend.
This is what I love about a show like this. And I've had, for the past 5 shows, all of them have been so great. Getting to know you all, and just having just a wholesome conversation about what you all do and what you do and your writing and so forth and investigating, and it does to me it's more of a bonding and instead of just an interview type.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think that this would be better if you and I were over a barbecue. So we'll have to plan on that. Hopefully our paths cross. We can sit down, have one of the most messy barbecues available, and we'll just talk about this kind of stuff, and we'll record it as we're doing it.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great. And then sit there when it gets dark and look at the stars and go, I wonder what's up there.
Hey, I'm all for that. We'll try to find a time in summertime because, like I said, I like Virginia. We'll try to find a time to do this, and it will be called the Rodney's Barbecue Hour. And we'll sit down. The listeners can hear us sucking on our thumbs as we're eating all this barbecue sauce, and they can open up a beer and listen to us talk about the supernatural.
That sounds great. That sounds great, my friend. But before you go, because I'll go ahead and let you go a little early.
You know what? As much as I talk, I'm almost my voice is almost out. So yeah, this is going to be good. I don't think I've talked this much in 2 hours in a long time. So this was a very lively conversation.
Oh well, that's great. I loved it. I enjoyed it. Dude, I can't say no more, but except just thank you so much. I know some people.
Thank you for having me on.
When they see 2 hours, they're like, I can't talk for 2 hours. I'm like, you'd be surprised. I can get you to talk for 2 hours. No.
Yeah, you do a good job, my friend.
It's because I'm a talker too. I like to get in there with you.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I'll definitely promote you. I'll tell you what. There's a lot of good guys out there. Look, I'm a big fan of Dave Scott and his Spaced Out Radio. I've been on his show for a while. I love Cat Ward. Jim Mellard's awesome. Brian Bowden, he and I do a podcast called Inside the Goblin Universe, and he also has some other things. I have been on a lot of shows. I've even been on, I've been on Coast to Coast. I've been on national shows as well, too. And these shows that I do, like with you, these are some of the most fun times I've ever had. So I really enjoyed my time with you, my friend. I really, I'm not even like blowing smoke here. I actually had more fun doing this show than I do those national shows. This was great.
Oh well, thank you. I'm trying to be a big wig like him, old boys.
Well, hey, look, you're standing toe to toe with them, and one day, whenever you get the recognition, then just pretend you knew me then. How about that?
Oh, I don't forget. I keep a list of everybody. I don't forget, because if I ever do make it big like that, I'll be like, hey, Ronald, could you come back on the show? You'd be like, you're nationally known? Yeah, fine.
Yeah, very nice, very nice.
Well, do you have if anybody wants to get a hold of you, any way they can contact you, as far as like a website or your Facebook page or so forth, and also how can people get a copy of your book or books?
Excellent. So, okay, books. Almost everybody goes to Amazon. You can go to Amazon, and you're going to probably get it cheaper than if you order it through a bookstore. But I would go through Amazon, or if you want me to give it to you at even a cheaper price than Amazon, and I can even autograph it for you, you can contact me directly at thegoblinuniverse@gmail.com. That's my personal email address. I do have websites up, but I'm not a big tech guy. I would much rather go through social media. Go to Facebook. You can like me at Ronald L. Murphy Jr. on Facebook, or you can friend me at Ronald Murphy. If you want to be my friend on Facebook, that's great too. I would love to talk to anybody. As you can see, I'll talk to anybody about anything. Even if you don't agree with me, I'll still talk with you. We'll have a great conversation. But yeah, so Inside the Goblin Universe @gmail.com, Ronald L. Murphy Jr. at Facebook, or Ronald Murphy at Facebook. Those are the best ways to do that. If you want a copy of my book, you can go to Amazon, or you could just come directly to me. And like I said, I could write a little note on it and send it out to you, and probably give it to you $5 cheaper than you could get it on Amazon for.
Well, that sounds good. Well, Ronald, I do appreciate you coming on the show. I like I said, it is an honor, and I've learned. I take so much from each one of my guests, and I took a lot from you tonight, and I do greatly appreciate it. And I am looking forward, if everything clears up where you can come down or I can come up and visit.
I cannot wait. You know what? I'm glad that we had this conversation because you are a genuine person. I like genuine people. You don't pull any punches. You get what you get with you, don't you? I mean, you're not putting on any airs, my friend. You're the definite article, like you or not, and that's the way I like it. And I trust that within the next couple months we'll be sitting down to a barbecue somewhere, and I cannot wait.
That sounds great. And thank you. Make me blush.
Oh, no worries, my friend. No worries. I'll promote you. I think you did a fantastic job. I'm flattered. Anytime anybody invites me on their show, I always think, what the heck do they want to talk to me about? But I'm flattered to be on these shows. Thank you so much, and I hope your listeners enjoyed hearing it. I can't wait to see some of the feedback.
Okay. Well, as soon as I get everything posted up, I'll send it to you.
I cannot wait, my friend. Hey, you have a good day. This is all going to end. We'll be just fine. Take care of yourself, and we'll talk to you soon. And the moment you want me on your show again, I will be there. I promise you.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, and I'll let you know. We'll probably work out something maybe towards the fall. Does that sound good to you?
I cannot wait. It sounds excellent to me.
Awesome. Well, Ron, you have a good night. Again, thank you for coming on the show, and also have a great weekend.
Thank you, my friend. You too.
Okay, bye-bye. Well, everyone, that was Ronald Murphy. Great guest. Learned a lot from him. Like I said, it was a heartfelt conversation. I love these types of conversations. I love when we have guests like this. And I'm sure you all do because I get so much great feedback from everyone. So for next week, we're going to have, it'll be May 7th. It'll be Elisa Parco. I know I messed up her last name, and I apologize. I'll figure it out. I can't read. I've been drinking. I'm just joking. I ain't been drinking. I've been drinking water. But she's a researcher and author of cryptids, including Bigfoot, Mothman, paranormal, UFO, and aliens. I'm sorry, everybody. I know that, when I first started, I was mostly into paranormal, but I love the cryptids. I do. Bigfoot, Mothman, paranormal, UFOs, aliens. I think it all works in together. Like I've talked so many times with so many different guests, and we're going to talk to another guest that we'll see what she has to say about all this. But until next week, everybody, please be safe. Please stay in if you can. And this virus is going to move forward. It has to, and we are going to see the light ahead, light of the tunnel. We just got to keep going. So, with that being said, love y'all. Have a good one. Here's the end of the show. Bye. That's it for us tonight. I want to thank everyone that took the time to listen in. I'd like to give a big shout out to the Vibe Radio Network and to Ryan for putting up with us. Also to all the first responders and our men and women in the armed services. Thank you for your service and the sacrifices that you and your families make every day to keep our great nation safe. Tune in next week to another exciting show starting at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Everyone can go to our Facebook page Within the Chaos, and don't forget to like our page to see upcoming guests along with past shows, postings, or you can also go to my website at www.blackdiamondps.org or blogtalkradio.com/Vibe Radio Network. Also, we have a YouTube channel, so go to YouTube, look up Within the Chaos for past shows. Thanks again. Until next week, everyone have a safe weekend and have a good night. And love you all. Be careful out there.
I'm sorry. But I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent, and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world, millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, or what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are not cattle, you are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite!